Morning. I'll be reading today from the book of Hebrews, chapter 4, verses 14 through 16. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need.
Well, good morning. Lots to share. We will have an opportunity, as I mentioned, in a couple of weeks for the team to talk about our trip, what we saw, the kind of things we learned, and the activities that we had a chance to participate in. But like I said, this has been on my mind as I came back, and something stood out to me in one of our visits that I want to share with you this morning as part of a sermon. In 2018, the last time that we were visiting Japan, when we got to see Joel and Hiro, Joel took our team out, as he often does, to sites of significance in the Mito area, showing us places or things that the folks in the area are familiar with and that are significant to people who live in the area of Mito. And one of those sites was a Shinto shrine in a tourist hotspot called Kasama. It was first built in 651 CE, and we were immediately introduced to this reality that we live in a place where there's nothing really that's old. The things we think of are old are quaintly considered just getting warmed up in the Japanese mindset. This shrine was built in this area because of the walnut trees that grew in the area. They were somehow decided to be embodied with spirits, significant in some way. And then by 651, a guardian shrine for local farmers and later merchants and craftsmen and business people sought blessings from these spirits for prosperity and for success. Joel explained that in Japan, people believe that all of nature is inhabited by kami, which are otherwise known as lowercase g gods. The sun, the moon, seas, stars, rivers, trees, mountains are all embodied forms of kami. And shrines like this are thought to be special places where some of those spirits in particular can be encountered and somehow coerced through worship and through the exchange of gifts. So if you were to have a baby, if you were going to have a baby, you would go to the shrine and you would drop your coins in and you would come to the front and bow and clap your hands a couple of times or ring a bell to get the attention of the spirits. And then you would bow and you would make your supplication to these spirits, asking them to intervene on your behalf, somehow acting in whatever way that they are able to. Or maybe you'll buy a talisman. Well, actually, I'll show you those later. Talisman. There were these things called inari that we'll see here in a minute that are considered guardian spirits of this particular shrine. And while the trees and so on might be embodied kami, foxes would be furtively seen from time to time just for a minute, and they would scurry off. And they became kind of thought of as the actual spirits themselves. And so when you're here, there's all kinds of shops where you can buy one of these little ceramic foxes, and you can either take it home as a talisman to be used, or you could leave it there somewhere in the shrine as your advocate to the spirits. Joel, of course, does not profess these beliefs as a follower of Jesus, but he believes that if you are going to serve these people, if you are going to share the gospel with the people of Japan, then you had better understand the beliefs that people around you hold and profess. And so as you turn off a small town street, you come to this gate and you enter into this space that's considered somehow different than the area around and the shops that are around there. This gate is a gateway into a sacred space. what the Celtic Christians would call thin spaces, places where the dividing line between divine activity and spiritual action and the everyday come close and even start to intermingle. There starts to be some interaction between these two worlds. You come to this walkway that we see Jacob on here. It's lined by shops, but also lined by lanterns that light the way. It's a long stone paved approach lined with these lanterns and with a couple of stone inari. There's one of them there. Each of them are perched on a pedestal. They are the guardians of the shrine, and while some animals and walnut trees grow in this shrine and are still thought to contain spirits, the inari are thought to be spirits themselves. The paths to places of worship, interestingly, are long. And Joel suggests that they're deliberately so. For in the Japanese mindset, the spiritual world is something that one must prepare themselves for. You don't just walk straight into the presence of a god, but instead you need to walk the way and prepare yourself and be mindful. There's one of the walnut trees, and the little lightning bolts around it remind people that this is an inspired object. This is an object that contains these spirits. Here are the inari that have been purchased over the last few weeks or months that are just piled up around these stone guardians. The paths to these places of worship are a journey in and of themselves. This is a picture of a Hindu temple that we visited later that day. And notice the narrow path. Notice the incline and the gardens. One must prepare for an encounter with the divine in the Japanese mindset. Gaku, one of Joel's oldest friends in Japan, has been a Christian now for more than 10 years and joined Joel on one of the tourist trips. And he wondered with Joel as they sat there watching things, what if we built a church like this? What if we built a church that kind of took in some of these attitudes and some of these ideas? Now, the Mito Church on the left is just a couple of blocks from the train station. Now, it is up a hill a bit, which we learned. But you walk in the door and you're immediately just one floor beneath the assembly space. And on the right's another picture of another church in Japan. What do you notice about these buildings? Of all the things that we saw in Japan, they're surprisingly familiar. They look Western. They look like they've been plucked right out of Canada and just plopped right there in Japan. Gaku was asking, what if we created a worship space, a church building, if you will, that incorporated some of these attitudes and these values? What if we had a church where you had to walk up a garden path? Now, accessibility concerns notwithstanding, what if we were better prepared for worship when we came into our sanctuary? After you walk the path, you come to a place called a Temizuwa, which is a place where you cleanse your hands with running water. And so you see right here the trough, some fresh water is pumped into this bamboo pole that's got holes all along that sprinkle water. Before COVID, you used to wash. In fact, the last time we were here, 7 years ago, we washed our hands in a pool that was over here somewhere. You take a ladle and you wash your left hand, and then you take the ladle and wash your right hand, and then you scoop some water and you drink a little bit in your mouth and you spit it somewhere not in the trough, on the ground. And then you scoop another scoop of water and let the water run down the handle, cleansing the ladle. The idea is that you're cleansing yourself, further preparing yourself for a spiritual encounter. Where am I here? There we go. Before, in the olden days, Joel says, people would be cleansed head to foot with running water. They would have to bathe before coming closer to the shrine. It's been simplified in these later days to just a cleansing of the hands and a splash of a mouth. A cleansing of words and cleansing of deeds. cleansing of mind and body, not unlike the Old Testament practice of washing before you enter the temple or the tabernacle. Mizuki, one of the young adults that visited Tintern back in 2019 before he was baptized, came to Joel shortly after the trip to Canada, and he asked him, "Is it true that one drop of Jesus' blood can cleanse a person forever?" You see, Mizuki grew up in a Shinto family, familiar with all of these traditions. And even as a teen, he wondered at this cleansing practice, a splash of running water to account for all the wicked words and selfish deeds that he had committed since the last time he visited. Is he really clean after being splashed with this water? Or is this water somehow insufficient for the task of cleansing someone of their sins? He heard Joel talk about the cleansing blood of Jesus offered once for all and wondered at such a claim. Is it possible that in one act, in one deed, one drop of Jesus could make everything wrong in his life right? Could Jesus do that? And would he do that? Finally, as you approach the shrine, you take your shoes off. The darkened interior is filled with a number of stools and a low table and various items that are used for special ceremonies or worship. On a Tuesday afternoon, there's nobody there. A groundskeeper pushed a wheelbarrow full of the first fall of leaves through a simple wooden gate to keep worshipers and tourists from the compost pile out back. While we were there, a young couple came forward with a new baby seeking a blessing in preparation for the Fall Chrysanthemum Festival, which was to start sometime in the next couple of weeks. So they dropped their coins in a box, and they came forward and they rang a bell, and they bowed and clapped their hands and made their requests for a blessing on this new baby that's been born. On their way back out, they bowed and talked to some other people that were on their way up to the shrine and spoke in Japanese, of course, and I only guessed that they were likely receiving congratulations on this new addition to their family, and they shared their daughter's name and exchanged pleasantries, but that was it. A peaceful exchange framed by familiar practices, and everybody just returned to the rest of their Tuesday afternoon. In our reading this morning, though, that Dave brought to us, Hebrews 4, verses 14 to 16 is the soaring conclusion to the first 4 chapters of that book. The first of 5 exhortations from the Hebrew writer. Therefore. And there is nothing here in the text that prepares us for this majestic word, therefore. There's no garden path in the text that could prepare us for this. No gate that we can walk through in the book of Hebrews. Therefore, not a gate surrounded by fall colors and quivering leaves stirred by cool breezes. Perhaps we do need a winding path this morning to prepare us for the words that the Hebrew writer has. They came to me this week as I was there at the shrine. I thought of these words, therefore. As we wandered the Inari shrine, I thought, therefore, since we have such a great high priest who's already ascended into heaven, let's hold firmly to the faith that we profess. The Hebrew writer's words reach out to steady us, the readers of this text, who stagger under the weight of the seeming futility of our actions. What is the point of all this, after all? What's the point of trading our affiliations with the traditions of our neighbors and our ancestors if we're just going to be abused for it or even killed for it? What's the point? Why bother? What are we even doing here this morning? The Hebrew writer reminds us, like a gateway, that there is more than just work on Monday. There's more than just school and chores and work and then retirement. Western culture has lied to us. The Western culture of the 21st century lives in what Charles Taylor calls a disenchanted world. And we tend to live like there's nothing outside this world that we can't see, taste, or touch, or smell. It's all material. There's nothing beyond that. And as a result, religion has been subtracted from our culture. It's an option, to be sure, and you're welcome to spend your time doing that. But most of our neighbors have no interest in that at all. And on any given Sunday, there's a non-zero percentage of members of this church that have no interest in being here on a Sunday too, if we're being completely honest. Eastern cultures, like that of Japan, are interesting for Christians to experience because the world still exists in Japan that has much more in common with what the Hebrew writer was experiencing. The Hebrew writer doesn't say, hey, priests are nothing, they're just guys that work at the temple. Forget the temple and forget all these practices, but rather, the Hebrew writer says, hey, look at these priests. We've got one that's better. You see these temples? There is one that is on high that surpasses them all. You see these torii gates and the garden paths that prepare our minds and our hearts, our bodies and souls for an encounter with God. Over a couple of weeks, we encountered countless unfamiliar sights and sounds. But when we came to the shrine, it was interesting. The experience was somehow familiar to someone who is familiar with Scripture and familiar with Old Testament worship practices. The Kaminari lightning and thunder, little white lightning bolts that are tied around the tree and tied around other objects. Kaminari means lightning and thunder, but it also is the word used to describe God. God that just is. Does that sound familiar? God Yahweh, I am that I am. I'm just the one that is. As we walked up towards this shrine, we had to wash and prepare ourselves for this encounter. There was this outer court in which we walked, and then we were prepared to come to an inner court, and then we took our shoes off and walked up to the very edge of the sacred space that held all these objects, after which you had to be a priest. And then there's this place in the middle that's so sacred and so holy that only the priest is allowed to go in. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Our God does not live in a box. Our God doesn't live here in this building. But at the same time, every moment is holy, in a sense. Every doorway offers a possibility of encounter with the divine. But the problem is that if every moment's holy in a Western culture, in a secular world, then nothing is. If every doorway is a gateway to a divine encounter in a secular world, nothing is. What I think we need is what the Hebrew writer here calls confidence. At the end of the reading that Dave brought to us this morning, the Hebrew writer says, let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we might receive mercy and find grace and help in our time of need. That word, confidence, intentionality. What if we greet every morning like an opportunity for divine encounter? What if we've got some practices that we do? A 5-minute pause before we pick up the cell phone, before we catch up on missed text messages, before we catch up on the news or whatever else is going. What if we had a practice and we began each day with just 5 minutes of encounter with the divine? What if we mark our places at work, or even mark our cars with lightning bolts, post-it notes with reminders that are telling us that there is a divine encounter that's as close as the air? What if we entered the doors of this church building, not with a superstitious expectation, but what if we entered the doors of this auditorium with the expectation that we will be met by brothers and sisters who are each made in the image of God, literally icons of God? May we find grace in our time of need. Here in the midst, may we be the grace and the help that our brothers and sisters need. May we provide for each other in this sacred exchange the very things that our brothers and sisters need. In the middle of our trip over the last couple of weeks, we had another worship encounter. The Mito congregation every year has a congregational retreat. They go to a campground up in the mountains about an hour north of Mito. And there we saw God water the land after a long, hot summer. We saw clouds form as they rose to meet us, clouds of sea air coming up to high elevations, turning into clouds and rolling over our heads as they continued on over the mountain. And we saw God fully present in the midst of our brothers and sisters. May we be a mountaintop experience for each other this week. Can you turn the sound on for the video?
英語の単語の中で最も難しい単語は一体何という単語でしょう？
The most difficult word in all of the English words.
Forgiveness。
Forgiveness.
許し。これ書いたり読んだりするのが難しいんじゃなくて実行するのが難しい。
The reason why it's difficult is not to read it or to write it, because to do it is the most difficult.
今年の収容会、何が一番美味しかったですか？
そうですね。今回はバーベキューですね。
ああ、特に？
お肉。
あ、はい、ありがとうございます。
私が自分の息子と息子の友達と一緒に山登りに出かけました。山の頂上に差し掛かった時に、東日本大震災のような非常に大きな地震があって崖崩れに巻き込まれました。私は気を失ってましたが、気づいた時にはこんな状況でした。私は崖のこのところにですね、こんな感じで体を突き出してました。そして右手には私の息子の手を、左手には息子の友達の、仮にケンちゃんとしますけれども、ケンちゃんの手を握ってました。私が両手を離したら2人の命はありません。でも私はもう体力の限界、究極の選択を迫られます。1人しか助けられない。すなわち片方の手を離して1人を引き上げる。大変申し訳ありませんが、私はおそらくケンちゃんの手を離して息子を引き上げると思います。しかし私たちの神様はその逆をしたんですね。イエス・キリストの手を離して私をあなたを引き上げてくださいました。